Welcome back to MHS Midnight Horror Stories. I know that many of you come to these videos as a gentle way to unwind before drifting off to sleep. So, before you close your eyes tonight, could I ask you for one small favor? Just leave me a quick interaction, a comment, a like, or maybe share where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Little actions like that help YouTube recognize the content and spread it to more people who might enjoy it. My current goal is to reach around 300 likes within the first 24 hours. Now then, let's step into tonight's chilling stories together. My name is Alex. I grew up in the quiet town of Ardmore, Pennsylvania. There wasn't much to do there, so finding something fun was always a challenge. When I was in high school, my 3 friends and I often snuck into old abandoned buildings to explore. It was something we loved to do. It wasn't until many years later that I realized that urban exploration is actually a pretty common thing. There was an abandoned church in town that we had visited a few times before. It was creepy, but it was our go-to spot whenever we were looking for a thrill late at night. One chilly fall evening, the air was cool and crisp. We decided to visit the church and have a few drinks inside. The church was behind an 8-foot-high chain-link fence, so we had to climb over it. All of the doors were boarded up, so we always had to enter through a side window. When we got inside, the first thing we noticed was that the floor was strange. The first floor was just dirt, like someone had removed all of the floorboards a long time ago. It left a deep hole in the middle with concrete steps leading down to the basement. We always hung out in that basement. The basement had 3 rooms, but only one had a door. The other 2 were just door frames. The first room we entered was the biggest. There wasn't much in it besides a few old pieces of furniture, broken chairs, and a tattered couch. I remember having to remind my friend Max to be quiet at least a dozen times because he was drunk and getting loud. Still, being in a group was an advantage, and I felt safer knowing there were a few of us together. We drank and laughed as usual. We may have even had music playing, but I don't remember clearly. Then suddenly a door slammed shut. The sound was so loud it startled me. We froze, looking at each other nervously. At first I thought maybe one of us had accidentally closed the door, or that it was just the wind, but nobody was close to it. Immediately my friends Luna and Allie panicked and took off. They flew up the stairs, leaving me and Max behind. I didn't want to leave right away. My heart was pounding, I admit, but I didn't want to let the sound scare me. Max looked at my friends leaving, then looked at me, and gave me a silly smile. I knew he was just drunk, not brave. After a few minutes of standing in silence, we decided to investigate. I tiptoed to the door that had just slammed shut and opened it. Behind it was a small room. Max walked past me and went into the room with a carefree look on his face, as if nothing was strange. He touched a dusty wooden table and shook his head, then even sat down in a chair next to it, relaxing as if he were in a familiar place. I walked in and looked around. Besides the table and chairs, there was a wooden shelf. On it was a mirror with some red stains on the surface. At first, I thought it was old paint or something similar, but when I got closer, I noticed something horrifying. They weren't completely dry. The stains were still sticky. I felt the hair on my arms stand up and started to regret not leaving sooner. Clearly, someone or something had been in this room recently. Then, I saw an old photo on the shelf. It was a black and white picture of a woman in a wedding dress. I backed away, and just as I turned, I heard another sound. This time it wasn't a door. It was coming from one of the other rooms, the big room in the basement that we had just left. At this point, I decided it was time to leave. I quickly grabbed our stuff and pulled Max out of there as fast as I could. He was just a body moving, but his mind was asleep, and it took a lot of effort to pull him. I took a deep breath and slapped Max hard to get him to wake up. Then I pushed him to go first. Luna and Allie were still outside waiting for us. When I climbed over the fence and put my feet on the sidewalk, none of us said a word. Before we left, I looked back, and I swear I saw a person's silhouette standing in the open window frame. I still pray that, by some small chance, my mind was playing tricks on me, but I'll never know for sure. I never went back to that church again. Many years later, I went back and found that the church had been completely demolished. I still can't find an explanation for what happened that night. I'm glad my friends were there to witness it with me. If I had been alone, I would have doubted the whole thing. 3 weeks have passed since that night, but every time I close my eyes, I see that rugged face pressed against my car window. I'm Mason, 21, and a junior at Ohio University. It all started on a day in late October. I went to my classmate Jake's house to finish a final project that was due soon. I lived in an apartment in town. Jake lived with his parents in a small log cabin on the side of a hill outside of town. To get there, I had to drive on a lonely road that wound through old oak forests and abandoned cornfields. We started working at 6 p.m. We were struggling with numbers and spreadsheets. By the time we finished, it was past 10 p.m. Jake suggested that I stay because the drive home at night wasn't very pleasant. But I refused. I had an early class the next morning, and I wanted to sleep comfortably at home. I left Jake's house at about 10:50 p.m. That night, there was no moon. Everything was pitch black. My car's headlights lit up the road ahead, creating a faint tunnel of light between the dark shadows of the trees. I drove carefully. I kept my speed around 30 miles an hour. The road was full of potholes and uneven. I was afraid of damaging a tire. I estimated I had gone about 5 miles from Jake's house when I came to a sharp left turn on the side of the hill. The dense trees on both sides blocked my view of what was ahead. I slowed down and slowly took the turn. As soon as I got through the turn, I was startled. I slammed on my brakes. A pickup truck was parked diagonally across the road, completely blocking my way. My car stopped about 20 feet from the pickup truck. I could see a small camping tent set up in the bed of the truck. On both sides of the road were deep drainage ditches. I couldn't drive around it. Through the windshield, I saw a person in the cabin. The person had their head down on the steering wheel. They looked like they were unconscious. My first thought was to get out and see if I could help. But as soon as I reached for the car door handle, I stopped. I looked at the situation again. The way the pickup truck was parked was too perfect for a roadblock. It wasn't tilted to one side like after an accident. It was parked at a calculated angle, leaving no room for another car to pass. I remembered the stories that Jake used to tell me about robberies on lonely roads in this area. There were people who faked an accident to trick kind people into stopping to help. I muttered a curse. My hand was shaking as I put the car in reverse. I decided to go back to Jake's house to call the police. If someone really was in trouble, the police and an ambulance would handle it better than I could. As I slowly backed up, my eyes kept darting between the rearview mirror and the front to keep an eye on the pickup truck. I needed to find a spot wide enough to turn around. Suddenly, the man in the pickup truck looked up. At that moment, the back of the pickup truck started making noise. 1, 2, then 3 men jumped out of the camping tent. All 4 of them started running toward me. The blood in my body froze. My foot stomped on the gas pedal. My car sped backward. I found a slightly wider spot on the side of the road. It was the entrance to an old field. I turned the wheel hard to turn around. The wheels hit a tree stump, but at this point, I didn't care. I kept pressing the gas. When I shifted into drive, the first man had already run to the passenger door. He yanked on the door handle. I saw his face. I could tell he was a heavy drug addict. Luckily, I always have a habit of locking my car doors as soon as I get in. He grunted and ordered me to open the door. He punched the window hard. I floored it. The engine roared. The car shot forward. I saw another man run up and try to block the front of the car, but I didn't slow down. He had to jump to the side to avoid being hit. In the rearview mirror, I saw all 4 of them running after my car. But of course, they couldn't keep up. The last thing I saw was them standing in the middle of the road, watching the back of my car disappear into the night. My heart was pounding like a drum. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I was afraid I would see their headlights appear behind me. I pounded on the door to wake up Jake's family. When I told them what had just happened, Jake's face turned pale. Jake's dad asked me if I'd called the police. I shook my head. My phone didn't have service. Jake's dad called. While waiting for the police to arrive, I sat on the sofa in the living room, still trembling. Jake's mom made me a cup of hot tea. 20 minutes later, the police arrived. I told them the whole story from beginning to end. The police officer said that Road had a bad history. Last year, there were a few similar incidents, but the police still hadn't caught the robbers. The police then went to the road to check. There was no one there. Only a few tire tracks on the road were the only evidence. I stayed at Jake's house that night. Jake's mom made up a bed for me in the living room. His dad even lent me a shotgun to protect myself if I needed it. He said they didn't know if those guys had followed me. It was better to be safe than sorry. 3 weeks have passed since that terrifying night. Even though the police have increased patrols on that lonely road, and I have chosen a different route to Jake's house, the horrifying event still left a scar on my mind. Every time I close my eyes, the rugged face of the stranger still appears clearly. He haunts me, as if he's still pressed against my car window. My car was repaired for almost $300. I consider that a small price to pay compared to what worse things could have happened that night. From this incident, I learned a valuable lesson about being cautious, especially when I have to go out alone at night. I once thought that my busy days would be balanced by quiet nights alone in my suburban home. But that night, when the back door alarm went off and I quickly dismissed it as a system error, everything changed. My name is Emily, and I'm 34 years old, living alone in Phoenix, Arizona. As an entrepreneur, my days are usually busy and non-stop. Every night when I turn off my laptop, my mind feels like it just ran a marathon. What I value more than anything is a quiet night at home. I live in a 2-story house in a suburban neighborhood. It was a weekend night. I had just finished a long day of client meetings and emails. All I wanted to do was watch my favorite movie with a glass of wine. The house was so quiet. It was the kind of silence you only really feel when you're completely alone. I had no idea how fragile that silence was. Around midnight, just as I was about to go upstairs to bed, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call or a text. It was a notification from my home security app. Backdoor alarm activated. I opened the app and saw the alert. I checked the camera and didn't see anything unusual. I didn't think much of it. I deactivated the alarm, thinking it was probably a bird, and that was my mistake. I went upstairs to my room. A few minutes later, I was starting to fall asleep, but then I heard a soft thud. My eyes snapped open. At first, I thought maybe the wind had knocked something over outside. I held my breath. I listened carefully. Then another sound came. This time, it sounded like something heavy being dragged across the floor downstairs. My heart started to pound. I got up and quietly locked my bedroom door. My mind raced. I started thinking about what to do next. I had taken precautions. Every door and window had sensors. My phone was connected to the security system. I even kept a gun in my nightstand drawer. But none of that brought me any comfort right now. The thought of a stranger in my house made me feel like I had been violated. It was something I was not prepared for. Another sound came. It sounded like a chair falling over. I quickly grabbed my phone and called 911. I whispered my address to the dispatcher and explained what I had heard. They reassured me that the police were on their way. I added, "Please tell them not to use their lights or sirens. If someone is inside, they will hear them." The dispatcher stayed on the line as I took the gun from my drawer and hid in a corner of the room. The sounds became more frequent and less subtle. I think they were rummaging through stuff downstairs. I heard very light footsteps on the stairs. My body wouldn't stop shaking. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped. The house was completely silent for a few seconds. I swear that silence was scarier than any sound. There was no way to know what was going to happen next. I was almost completely holding my breath, my hands gripping the gun tightly. Then there was a gentle knock on my bedroom door. I immediately aimed my gun at the door, telling myself not to panic. The dispatcher's voice was still in my ear. "The police are almost there." A few minutes later, I heard noises outside. I heard an engine, followed by whispered voices. The police had arrived. A wave of relief washed over me. About 3 more minutes passed. Then, there was a loud sound downstairs. Shouting followed. Then, it was silent again. Finally, a voice announced that it was safe, and I could come out. I cautiously opened the door, with my gun still in my hand, and stepped into the hallway. An officer was waiting for me. His face was serious. "We got them." There were 2 men. They were downstairs when we came in. My knees almost buckled as I followed him down to the living room. The 2 handcuffed men were sitting on the floor. Another officer explained that they had entered the house through the back door. They had managed to unlock it somehow. They said they thought no one was home because there was no car in the driveway. I suddenly remembered that I had lent my car to my brother a few days earlier. The police searched the house and found a crowbar and a few zip ties in the intruders' bags. An officer pulled me aside and said softly, "You did the right thing. You stayed in your room and called us. That's why you're safe tonight." At the time, I just nodded. I didn't fully understand the meaning of his words. It wasn't until I was calm and thought about the whole thing that I truly understood. I made a mistake by deactivating the back door alarm. I thought it was just a system error or caused by a bird. We need to take all security alerts seriously. Ignoring them can lead to dangerous consequences. In the following weeks, I installed a reinforced security system along with motion-activated cameras. But even with those precautions, I sometimes lie awake at night, trying to listen to the silence. The feeling of being threatened that night still hasn't left me. Before, being alone at night was a precious time to rest after a long day. Now, it just reminds me that peace can be very fragile and that a sense of security is never guaranteed. I am Shelia, 17 years old. That holiday, I'd gotta watch Oak, my uncle's sweet lab, for a couple of days. After that, my parents were gonna stay with me, and my uncle's family would be back. I was pretty excited because it was my first time being alone in such a big house. My uncle lives in a fancy suburb where the houses are big, comfy, and quiet. Oak's living the good life. He even has a big cupboard in his kitchen just for his food and toys. The cupboard's as big as a fridge, which just shows how much love and care Oak gets. Before he left, my uncle told me Oak's a greedy dog. He also warned me that Oak's always trying to bust open the cupboard to sneak some food. My uncle's trying to keep his diet in check since some of his health numbers aren't looking too great. The first day went way smoother than I thought. Oak was a good boy, following me around the house with his tail wagging like crazy. We took a walk in the yard, played some ball, and headed back when it started getting dark. I fixed Oak's meal like my uncle told me to. After dinner, Oak just laid on the carpet, looking pretty content. I brushed Oak's fur, cleaned his paws, ears, and teeth, then gave him a bath. When I was done with the bath and came back to the living room, I saw Oak sitting still in front of his food cupboard. His eyes were locked on the cupboard like something was pulling him in. I laughed, thinking he was begging for more food. I went over, gave Oak a pat on the head, and told him dinner was done. But instead of being his usual obedient self, Oak suddenly barked so loud. The bark echoed through the house and totally freaked me out. I had no idea what was going on. Oak had never been this aggressive before. I tried to calm him down with a softer voice, but Oak's eyes still wouldn't leave the cupboard. At this point, I started getting this uneasy feeling. Not wanting Oak to wreck the cupboard, I grabbed a small lock from the kitchen drawer and locked the pantry carefully. Then I went back to the couch, turned on the TV, and tried to forget about how weird Oak was acting. But every time I looked back, there he was, still sitting there with his eyes stuck on the cupboard like he was hypnotized. His eyes were locked on the cupboard, and it made me feel like something was off. I drifted off to sleep without even realizing it. Suddenly, Oak's loud barking woke me up. Oak wasn't just barking, he was also growling like crazy. It stood in front of the cupboard, eyes full of aggression like I'd never seen before. I sighed, thinking his greed was just over the top. But when I got closer to the cupboard, a terrifying sight stopped me in my tracks. Through the little gap in the cupboard door, I saw a sharp blade slowly cutting through the lock. My throat went tight, and I couldn't make a sound. A chill ran down my spine when I realized it wasn't just Oak's greed. I screamed in panic, backed up, and tripped, hitting the floor. Oak kept barking non-stop, and his barks echoed like he was trying to warn everyone. I laid on the floor, my whole body shaking, too scared to take my eyes off the cupboard. There was only one thing on my mind. There's someone in there. But how could that be? The house was locked, and I'd been here all day. Oak's barking caught the neighbor's attention. An old guy knocked on the door, looking pretty annoyed by the noise. I ran out crying and shouting for help. The neighbor looked at me all worried and quickly called the cops. A few minutes later, the sound of police sirens filled the night. I hid behind the neighbor as the officers went inside. Oak was still standing in front of the cupboard, growling. An officer stepped up and carefully opened the cupboard. In that moment, I thought I was going to stop breathing. There was a man inside the cupboard. He was super skinny, his face all twisted with sunken eyes and a creepy grin. When they pulled him out of the cupboard, he started laughing real loud, and his creepy laugh echoed everywhere. I was frozen. My whole body went numb. The police quickly restrained him, but that wild look and creepy smile were still locked on me and wouldn't let up. My parents showed up that night. I threw myself into their arms, crying like a little kid. Oak ran over and rubbed his head against my leg like he was trying to comfort me. I hugged Oak, thanking the brave dog for saving me from that crazy situation. The next morning, my uncle rushed back as soon as he heard about what happened. He couldn't believe something so crazy had happened in this quiet house. The police later said the guy was a mentally ill homeless guy who had snuck into the house a few days ago without anyone noticing. From that day on, I never stayed home alone at night again. I asked my parents if I could get a French bulldog and name him Ziggy because I love and trust these sweet, brave little dogs. Oak will always be my brave buddy in my memories, the dog who saved me that awful night.
I'm Lonnie, 18 years old, the only daughter in the family. My family lives in the town of Atherton, California. The name Lonnie that I have also reflects the love that everyone has for me. Since I was little, I have always been described as a healthy, beautiful, and nice girl. Perhaps many people would think that I am so beautiful, partly inherited from my parents. But no, my parents look very different. My father is much older than his age. I don't have any resemblance to my father. My mother has pale, sallow skin, a thin and lifeless body. The lines on my mother's face are very beautiful, but they are not well taken care of. I often see my mother sitting alone with a pale and tired face. I would run to hug her and ask if she was okay. Mom would always smile kindly, hug me tightly, and cry for a long time. I was educated by my parents, and especially my grandmother, to be a good girl and not putting my nose into other people's affairs. So I grew up in a cocoon of love and affection. I was carefree and obedient to adults. Even in situations I didn't like, I wouldn't resist or argue. Speaking of my grandmother, her name is Ira. My grandmother is very young and beautiful, completely different from my mother. My grandmother has fair, smooth skin, a firm and attractive figure, even though she's almost 60 years old. I know my grandmother is a single mother. She has only one child, my father. I have never seen her mention any other relative, and I also don't know anyone other than my father, mother, and grandmother. My grandmother's house is about a 30-minute drive from my house. My parents would take me to stay with her every weekend. My grandmother is very gentle. She teaches me to always love and take care of myself. Do not let any dirty marks appear on your skin because you will look very ugly. Your hair must always be fragrant and smooth. The clothes you wear must be the most beautiful and expensive. Do not eat food which origins are unknown. You must eat food prepared by your mother's own hands or prepared by me. Those are the things my grandmother always teaches me since I was little. Every weekend, staying with my grandmother made me very happy because I felt loved very much. One weekend, my parents took me to visit her. When she saw the small scratches on my nails, my grandmother got angry with my parents. On such occasions, I always saw my mother's face full of fear and panic. My mother dared not speak up. There's another strange thing. Every time my parents took me to visit my grandmother, my mother and grandmother would go into a separate room to talk. Dad and I would wait outside. I would look towards the door of my grandmother's room. It would be a long time before they came out. I would run to hug my mother again, every time I saw the fatigue and discomfort on her face. On my mother's hand, every time they came out of my grandmother's room, there would always be a plaster. My mother would try to shield it with her hand, but I always saw it. In the summer of the year I finished middle school, my grandmother said my parents should let me stay with her for a long time. During the days at my grandmother's house, I got to know a neighbor boy my age named Mike. Mike is kind and funny. We quickly became friends. One day, while playing with Mike, I accidentally slipped and fell. Mike quickly helped me up. Blood was flowing from my hand. I was worried that I would be scolded more than worrying about the wound. My grandmother suddenly appeared with a terrifying, angry face. She grabbed my hand, looked at the bleeding wound, took a deep breath. I thought she was trying to calm down. Mike, seeing my grandmother's angry face, stood frozen in fear. Both Mike and I seemed unable to breathe, staring intently at my grandmother. My grandmother held my hand, slowly led me closer to Mike. Then, my grandmother looked at me, looked at the wound on my hand, then turned to look at Mike. Very quickly, strongly, and decisively, my grandmother slapped Mike hard. She shouted loudly, demanding that Mike stay away from me forever. I looked at Mike, feeling guilty for my friend, but I didn't dare to speak up for him. I just bowed my head and remained silent, because I was very scared. My grandmother took me home. I always had to prepare mentally for her punishment. But grandmother gently sat down beside me, lifted my injured arm to observe. Then, my grandmother kissed the wound. I looked at her in surprise. My blood was smeared all over my grandmother's mouth. She looked at me, smiling kindly as usual, but mysteriously and frighteningly. She said she would help me bandage the wound and then lick the blood on her mouth, an expression of satisfaction. I was very scared. My emotions were chaotic. I sat there motionless, afraid to speak up, just silent. The terrifying strictness and surveillance of my grandmother as I approached the age of 18, it made me suffocate. I began to notice my mother's aging more and more clearly and quickly, while my grandmother's beauty seemed to last forever. I was old enough to understand and wanted to find out about everything. My grandmother always remained silent in the face of my questions. One evening, when my family was having dinner with my grandmother, my mother suddenly collapsed on the dining table and fainted. I worriedly tried to wake my mother up while my father called for an ambulance. I felt chilled by the indifferent gaze and the faint smile on my grandmother's lips. My mother was diagnosed with severe anemia and passed away after being hospitalized for a day. I was completely devastated. I lost one of my 3 closest relatives too suddenly. My mother's funeral was as cold and fleeting as the way my mother left me. I had to take nearly a month off from school because my mental state was unstable. One day, I came home from school. Passing by my parents' room, I suddenly heard my grandmother's voice. I gently approached to listen. "She's almost 18. Quickly find another replacement and nurture her well. Our bodies only suit the cleanest and purest things." I looked through the crack in the door, horrified to see an old, ugly woman with red glowing eyes drinking a bowl of blood. blood dripping down her chin and neck. That elderly face gradually rejuvenated. Her eyes returned to normal. It was my grandmother. The drops of blood fell to the floor, being licked clean by my father, who knelt down. The satisfaction on their faces, along with the maniacal laughter, completely destroyed me.
I work as a housekeeper at a well-known hotel downtown. Every day's the same. Check the list of rooms to clean, grab the cart, make sure all the supplies are there, and get to work. I've been doing this long enough that nothing really phases me anymore. Messy guests are no big deal. This morning, I unlocked a room on my list, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. Towels all over the floor, empty wine bottles covering the table, bed a total disaster. I pulled on my gloves and got to it, just like always. But when I went to change the sheets, something was off. The fabric wouldn't budge. I frowned, gave it another tug, and then bam, the sheet yanked free, and something came sliding out from under the bed. I froze. It was a girl, almost naked, covered in bruises. I had no idea if she was alive or dead, but my breath hitched, and my heart started slamming against my ribs. Before I could even process it, footsteps sounded outside the door. Hands shaking, I shoved the girl back under the bed and yanked the sheet into place. Right then, the door swung open. A man walked in, tall, dressed sharp. His suit fit like it was made for him, showing off his lean, polished look. His leather shoes gleamed, and the air filled with the scent of expensive cologne. His face was almost too perfect. He glanced at me and smiled. "Morning." I couldn't answer. My throat was dry, my whole body ice cold. I dropped my gaze, hurried to gather my stuff, doing everything I could not to let the panic show. I needed to get out. Now. But just as I reached for the doorknob, his voice stopped me. "Here's your tip." The $100 bill rested between his long fingers. I took it with shaky hands, just wanting to grab it and get the hell out of there. But before I could turn away, his voice came again, smooth, almost playful. "Strange. You haven't changed the sheets." My heart stopped. I stammered something, nothing that made sense, mumbling about grabbing fresh sheets. Before I could move, he gestured toward the sofa. "Isn't it right there?" I froze. A neatly folded white sheet sat on the couch. I didn't remember putting it there. My chest tightened, breathing felt harder, like the air in the room had thickened. I had no choice. Slowly, I walked over, grabbed the sheet, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. Turning back to the bed, I kept my eyes anywhere but the floor, anywhere but under the bed, where I knew exactly what was hidden. I peeled off the old sheet. It felt heavier than usual, like something was still inside. But I didn't dare check. Just pulled the fresh sheet over, smoothed it out, and worked faster than I ever had in my life. When I was done, I turned back to the cart, pretending to fuss with the cleaning supplies. I could feel his eyes on me, watching, waiting. The way he looked at me made every nerve in my body tighten like a drawn bowstring. I thought I was finally in the clear. But no, his voice came again. "You forgot this." I spun around. He was holding out another $100 bill. Same polite, charming smile. But this time, there was something else in it. Amusement. I couldn't refuse. Didn't dare. My fingers shook as I reached for the money. I turned away, ready to bolt, but then a light, casual voice behind me. "Looks like you haven't cleaned the sofa yet." My throat closed up. I didn't want to turn back, didn't want to stay here another second, but I couldn't refuse, couldn't risk setting him off. This time, when I bent down toward the chair, I noticed a small red stain smeared across the upholstery. "Is that?" I grabbed a rag, moving slowly, trying to wipe it away. Then his hand landed on my shoulder. No force, just a light touch. But the second his skin met mine, every vein in my body locked up, frozen. I shot to my feet, stumbling backward toward the door. He didn't let me get that far. "What are you afraid of?" The smile was gone now. Instead, his eyes studied me, like he was enjoying the way my fear curled around the edges of my face. I swung the glass cleaner in my hand and sprayed it straight into his eyes. He cursed, hands flying up instinctively to cover them. I didn't hesitate, slammed my foot straight into his groin. He doubled over, clutching himself, screaming in pain. I spun around, bolted for the door, hands shaking as I grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The moment the door swung open, I rushed out, screaming for help with all my remaining consciousness and strength. A receptionist heard my screams and rushed over. I told her to call the police immediately, pointing towards the horrifying room, and then passed out. Everything went black. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed, my head pounding. The doctor checked me over, and not long after, 2 police officers showed up with news about what happened. That man was Ethan Carter, a wanted serial killer with at least 5 murders in the city. My whole body went rigid. So the girl under the bed? One of the officers nodded. She was alive, drugged, unconscious. They got her to the hospital in time, and she was going to be okay. I let out a breath, but then another thought hit me. So what about him? The officer's voice dropped. Ethan Carter fought back, pulled a knife on us. We shot him on the spot. He's dead. I nodded weakly. It still felt like a bad dream, one I couldn't quite wrap my head around. But no matter what, I was alive. And I'd never forget the moment I came face to face with the devil himself. I'm Jackson, 14, living in a small town in the Midwest. My house is smack in the middle of a sparse forest, where oak and maple trees stretch as far as you can see. A week ago, my parents had to go on a business trip and left me home alone to take care of the place. My mom asked our neighbor Kate to check on me the first day, and my Aunt Tabby was supposed to stay over the next day. Like most teenagers, I was pumped to have the place to myself for a whole day, free to do whatever I wanted. But then, the quiet of the house, the eerie stillness of the forest, started creeping in, wrapping around me like a thick, dark curtain. That first night, I lay in bed, the soft yellow glow of my nightlight making the room feel less empty. But the peace didn't last long. There was a knock at the window. At first, I figured it was just the wind, but the tapping kept going, steady and relentless. When I pulled back the curtains, all I saw was darkness, but on the glass, a message appeared in the steam. I am looking at you. As I tried to make sense of what was happening, a piece of paper got shoved under the door. On it, in messy, slanted writing, "Do you want to know the secret of this house? Play my game." I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and tried to call my mom, but all I got was no signal. Right then, the lights started flickering like crazy. Then, boom, total blackout. Panic hit me hard. I ran to the front door, yanked at the handle, but it wouldn't move. The latch was locked. From the outside, a voice drifted in from the window.
"I used to live here before you came. This house has secrets your family never knew. I can help you find them, but you have to do what I say."
I was trapped, my own house, and I couldn't get out. In that moment, all the fear of a 14-year-old kid swallowed me whole. I couldn't say no. He slid another piece of paper toward me. "Go to the storage room under the stairs." The basement was a place I almost never went. It was dark, damp, and reeked of mold. With a shaky flashlight in my hand, I felt my way through the old wooden door. In the dim light, I spotted a big metal box buried under a pile of dusty old bottles. I pried it open and nearly dropped it in horror. Inside were rotting animal remains, cat bones, dog bones, even tufts of rabbit fur. The box reeked of death. My hands were shaking so bad, I let it go.
This is just the beginning.
From the window came a low, chilling voice. Go to the living room and look under the wood floor. I yanked up the old carpet in the living room and found a cracked floorboard. I pried it open. Sitting underneath was a glass jar filled with dried blood and tiny bone fragments. I couldn't tell what kind of animal the bones belonged to, but something in my gut told me they'd been there a long, long time. I picked up the jar, and as my flashlight hit it, my breath caught in my throat. Inside were several shriveled, dried-up human fingers. The fingernails were still there, but the skin had shriveled up into wrinkled, leathery patches. My whole body shook as I stumbled back. Who are you? Why are you doing this? He didn't answer. Instead, his voice drifted through the window, low and icy.
You want the truth? There's one more place. Check the kitchen cabinet under the sink.
I don't know why, but I listened. Fear had shut off every logical thought in my brain. I was just moving, like a puppet on strings. The second I pulled the cabinet door open, a disgusting, stomach-churning stench hit me like a punch to the gut. Among the rotting trash and crumpled plastic sat a black garbage bag, knotted tight. As I peeled it open, the first thing I saw was hair, dark, matted. Then, smaller pieces of bone, and buried deep inside, something that made my breath stop cold. A severed human hand. The skin pale, stiff, frozen in time. I let out a scream and fell backward, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. That hand, it clung to my mind, wrapping around me, pulling me down into a nightmare I couldn't escape. Then he stepped into view, standing outside the window. This time, he wasn't wearing a mask. His face was hollow, his eyes bulging with red veins, like he hadn't slept in years.
Did you see that?
He whispered.
This used to be my house. I lived here when it was abandoned, but then your family came, and he chased me away.
He pointed at the plastic bag.
That's what I left behind, proof that I was here. The animals I found, the people who tried to make me leave. You have no right to be in this house. It's mine.
Then, out of nowhere, he lunged inside, gripping a massive hammer. I didn't think. I just swung the baseball bat to him. With all my strength, it connected with a sickening crack. Panic had taken over, wiping out every other thought. Eyes shut tight, I just kept swinging, again and again. He finally hit the ground. Still. By the time the police got there, they found everything I told them about. Animal bones, human fingers, and the twisted tools he used to hunt and store his works. The human arm in the kitchen drawer was confirmed by DNA to belong to a guy who'd been missing for years. He used to live near the house and had a rocky history with the stranger. Turns out, he was the one who tried to kick the guy out when he was squatting there as a homeless man. That stranger had been using the house as his hideout for years. He had killed, dismembered, and stashed the remains in different corners of the house, his sick way of marking what he thought was his. The police found out he had a long history of severe mental illness, paranoia, violent outbursts, the whole deal. In his twisted mind, this house was the only place that made him feel safe. Losing it had pushed him over the edge. After everything, I couldn't go back to that house. I can't shake the feeling of being led step by step, like a puppet dancing on the strings of a madman. Every time I close my eyes, I hear his voice. I see that arm. In the end, I realized that real danger doesn't just come from the monsters hiding in the dark. It also comes from broken minds. Society left him behind and shoved him to the edges, and in his loneliness, he built a twisted world of his own. I'm Lauren Parker, 29, and I just landed a job at Heaven Spa, right down the street here in Denver. I used to be a therapist at a fitness center, but got let go when they started downsizing. Been bouncing between temp jobs for the last 3 months. So when I got the interview at Heaven Spa, I was beyond excited. The place is tucked away in this quiet, windowless building with a smooth stone exterior. The moment I stepped inside, a sudden chill ran through me, and I shivered. The front desk was dead silent. No soft music, no friendly hellos. The receptionist led me down this long hallway, where soft yellow lights flickered against ivory walls covered in weird spiral designs, looked like tangled up snakes. At the end of the hall, Marion Hale, the manager, was waiting for me. She was a tall, thin, middle-aged woman with long black hair and an hourglass figure. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "So, you're Lauren? Welcome." After a quick interview, mostly just personal questions and small talk, Marion took me to another room. There were 4 other new hires already sitting there. A middle-aged guy with sunken eyes, a young girl, a woman, and a skinny dude. Nobody said a word, like they were already used to this weird vibe. Marion told us to hand over all our stuff, phones, watches, wallets. She just stood there, staring us down, waiting for us to go along with it. No one argued, no explanation, just cold silence. Then the lights dimmed, and a screen lit up with this pale blue glow. "Your body isn't yours," a ghostly voice echoed. "You're a gift of healing." When the lights came back on, the room was dead quiet. The young woman suddenly broke down crying, jumped up, and bolted out of there, with the skinny guy right behind her. Marion didn't stop them. She just smiled, like she knew it was going to happen. "Those who stick it out will get what they deserve," she said. I hesitated, ready to get up and leave, but Marion's words froze me in place. I needed the money. And just like that, I started working at Heaven Spa. My job was simple, treating clients using Heaven Spa's so-called special methods. Every client came in through a separate entrance. I never saw their faces, and it felt like they were ghosts, like they weren't even real people. We did treatments with weird names like purification, integration, rebirth. No one ever really explained what any of it meant. After every session, my body felt heavy, drained in a way I couldn't explain. My memory started slipping too, pieces just gone, without a trace. Marion always told me I was doing great. Marion hooked me up with perks too, a private room, free meals, and some pretty sweet bonuses. At the end of each workday, we'd all meet in this dark room to go over how we did. The place was dim, and there were whispers all around us. I did whatever Marion told me, no questions asked, but I couldn't really remember what I did with the clients. When I left the room, all I could think about were the customers and the fat bonuses that kept me stuck in this job. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't remember anything else. One day, I noticed a bruise on my wrist in the shape of a spiral, just like the symbols on the walls. I looked in the mirror. It was still me, but my eyes looked cloudy, like they didn't belong to me anymore. I knew something seriously sketchy was going on, but I couldn't stop myself from going along with it. Those end-of-day meetings kept getting weirder and weirder. We stood in a small circle, surrounded by a bigger circle of doctors, nurses, and people who'd been working here forever. They told us to close our eyes and listen to the sounds coming from every direction while the people in the outer circle started mumbling. The sounds were a mess, nothing clear, just noise that drilled into my brain and ears. Over time, we all learned to mumble along, like it was second nature. One night, I cracked my eyes open during the ceremony and noticed the guy next to me was gone. No one said a word about him the next day. Then more of them started disappearing, one by one, like they never existed. I started questioning everything I was doing. My body felt weaker every day. My sleep was all over the place, and sometimes I'd wake up with small cuts on my skin. No clue how they got there. Why wasn't anyone talking about them? Were they really gone, or was I just losing my mind? If I stayed, was I going to be the next one to vanish? One night, after finishing work, I made up some excuse to skip the meeting. I wandered down the hallway, lost in thought, trying to decide if I should stick it out or just walk away from this job for good. Before I knew it, I was standing in front of a room I didn't recognize. A chill shot down my spine, making my heart race, but my curiosity wouldn't let me walk away. After making sure no one was behind me, I crept over and gently pushed the door open. A dark, stuffy room hit me with a strong, musty smell. On the floor, there were piles of white uniforms mixed with watches, rings, phones, and wallets, all covered in dust. My hands were shaking as I walked to the far wall, where portraits of former employees were plastered up but their eyes had been scratched out, leaving creepy, empty spaces. At the very end, I saw my own portrait. It was still untouched. Was this what was going to happen to me too? Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my shoulder and straight to my head. My body shut down, and I collapsed to the floor, fading into darkness. When I woke up, my body felt heavy, and I realized I was lying on a treatment bed, surrounded by figures dressed in white. They were chanting, their voices hissing through the air like snakes. A cold hand touched my forehead, sending chills through my whole body. I tried to move, but I was completely paralyzed. Marion's whisper filled my ear. "You're about to become one of us." And that's when it hit me. People like me aren't healers. We're the fuel. My life force was being drained bit by bit, breath by breath. The room spun around me, my vision blurred. I can't die here. Now I've got a new role at the spa, greeting new candidates for interviews. You're Zavia. Welcome. I am Martha, 32 years old, and a single mother. My 6-year-old daughter Sophie and I live in San Jose, one of the most expensive cities in the US. Our life is not a cozy life. You could say it's quite difficult. My husband passed away when Sophie was 4 years old due to a car accident. Sophie has a disease related to her eyes and needs surgery soon. Otherwise, it could affect her ability to see in the future. Although the government provided medical and educational support for us, the high cost of living in San Jose, combined with my unstable job situation, together, they forced me to work many long hours doing various jobs just to make ends meet. I have considered moving to another city to live, but there are many constraints that prevent us from doing so. One day when I picked Sophie up from school, I received bad news. My father had passed away suddenly that afternoon, with the initial cause determined to be a heart attack. I don't have many relatives. The only one I keep in touch with is my father, who was 67 years old and lived nearly 400 miles away from me. I arranged my work and took Sophie to her grandfather's house in Sacramento, California. After taking care of my father's funeral, I was scheduled to meet with his assistant to discuss some matters. The man name's Benny. He had worked for my father for nearly 20 years. Benny took me to my father's art gallery. My father was a painter. Benny introduced me to a painting of a stunning woman with a cold gaze looking straight ahead. She was bound with a golden chain. I wasn't sure why, but I felt a cold chill running down my spine looking at that painting. Benny said that this painting was demanded by a wealthy businessman at a very high price. And now, since he'd passed away, I am the legal owner of this painting and countless other paintings my father left behind, as dictated by inheritance law. To be fair, I really didn't care much about my father's paintings, and I had always felt that way since I was little. After discussing and fixing a reasonable price with Benny, I decided to sell the painting. That would be a good sum to taking care for Sophie. However, the painting had a few minor defects due to not being properly maintained. The paint on the woman's eyes was peeling and needed to be repaired before it could be sold. Benny said he would hire a talented artist to quickly work on the painting. Sophie and I would stay here for a while until the sale was completed, also for her summer break. When I entered my old childhood room, a pleasant sense of nostalgia hit me all at once. The room had remained exactly the same for many years. The next morning, Benny brought a young painter named Logan. Logan analyzed a lot about the painting for me, but it's all yada yada to me at this point. I gave him a price and the time frame for him to finish the painting as soon as possible, and he agreed. As Logan began his work, I lingered back to see my father's final work. The woman's eyes in the painting were indeed beautiful, yet terrifying to look at. It felt as if she was staring right at me, no matter what angle I viewed her from. When I stared intently, suddenly those eyes moved. The woman in the picture just blinked at me. I jolted and called out to Logan in a panic. He turned to look at me, but when I looked back at the painting, it had returned to normal. Maybe it's just the trick of the eyes. When I returned to the house, I didn't see Sophie anywhere. I called out her name several times without anything back. I ran upstairs, and as soon as I entered the room, I saw Sophie sitting on the bed. I furiously asked her why she hadn't replied when she heard me calling. Sophie sat on the bed, trembling, her face pale, and she spoke in a muffled whisper. "There's someone under the bed." I stood frozen, staring at my daughter. Sophie looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. I could no longer control my breathing. My mind thought this was just her childhood fear of being alone, but I didn't act decisively. I bent down lower toward the underside of the bed and slowly leaned forward to look over. The closer I got, the more could I feel someone's breathing there, but there was nothing down there. "It's just a trick of the eyes, sweetheart. Don't be afraid," I reassured Sophie, but immediately her innocent brown eyes stared back at me widely. I jumped up and screamed aloud, picked Sophie up, and dashed toward the door. Feeling something was amiss with my daughter, I stopped and took a closer look. Ophie's eye sockets were deep red, blood streaming down her small face and over her white dress. The eyes that I just saw under the bed were of Sophie. I pushed Sophie away, sank to the floor, and screamed in fear. The door swung open. Logan rushed in with Sophie in his arms, looking at me panikedly. I looked at Sophie, and then back at the image on the floor. It had disappeared. Rushing over to Sophie, I hugged her tightly, then checked on her face carefully. Logan said that Sophie had been in the shed with him since I left, so it was all in my head, stressed up and tired. It was still in a mess after all this time, ever since my husband passed away. After I calmed down, Logan told me to go to the shed. He had something he wanted me to see. The woman's eyes in the painting had been repaired by Logan. However, near her face, some paint had chipped away, revealing one eye. That eye was so familiar, yet I couldn't recognize it. What was hidden behind the perfection of this painting? Logan said he was creeped out by the woman's gaze, feeling as though he was being watched. Although I had the same feeling as Logan, I didn't told him about it. Instead, I told him to fix the painting quickly by tomorrow, and I would happily pay him extra. I just wanted to leave this house as soon as possible and wouldn't mind pushing anything further. That night, I woke up to find Sophie not beside me. I hurriedly searched for her. I checked the bathroom, living room, and kitchen, but couldn't find Sophie anywhere. Remembering what happened this morning, I ran down to the storage to look for Sophie. As I opened the door and stepped in, I avoided the creepy gaze from the painting and called my daughter's name. "Mom!" Sophie's voice called out from deep within the shed. I had never been inside this shed before. All I knew was that it housed hundreds of my father's paintings, and I had always tried my best to not been too curious about them. Through the dim light of my phone's flashlight, I found Sophie. She was trembling and clung tightly upon coming close to me. Just as we turned to leave, I shone the light ahead. That woman's face without eyes suddenly appeared. I screamed and held Sophie tightly. A few seconds later, nothing else happened. I took a deep breath and continued to shine the flashlight ahead. This time, it was a woman with bruised skin, smiling, but smeared all over with red blood. I was startled at that, yet I was sane enough to cover Sophie's eyes with my hand. And this time, I decided to come closer to look at that person again. It seemed she was the same as the woman without eyes in the picture I had seen earlier. I fumbled in the darkness searching for the switch to turn on the lights. As soon as the lights came on, I was shocked to see many horrific images surrounding me. There were dozens of paintings depicting that very same woman, each showing different brutal methods of torture. The two horrifying women I had seen earlier were among the paintings here. Each painting clearly recorded the date and time it was created, accompanied by my father's familiar signature. One painting marked the last date as June 13th, 2023, featuring the beautiful brown eyes. I easily recognized that the woman in the paintings here was the same as the one in the painting Logan was fixing. What's peculiar is that the woman in these paintings, despite being tortured, still had beautifully painted eyes that were meticulously done. Sophie's cries jolted me out of my trance of thoughts. I took her back to the room, and Sophie quickly fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up early. The first thing I did was return to the shed. I scraped the paint off the painting. Behind that strange eye, a man's face emerged. It was my father. I used both hands to scrape off all the paint, destroying the valuable painting. Another painting appeared. The woman, tightly bound with chains, was being strangled by my father pulling one end. Despite the blood oozing out from her broken body, her beautiful brown eyes were still glaring coldly from her disfigured face. I sought out Benny. I wanted to learn about my father's life when I wasn't around. It took a long time to convince him, and finally, Benny told me the whole truth. My father had a special passion with women's eyes. After many years of searching, he found Donna, the model for the woman in the paintings. Donna was both his lover and his model for all the paintings. Gradually, my father's personality changed. He became more and more possessive and controlling. He realized that the only thing he wanted was Donna's eyes. He once told Benny, "The most beautiful eyes of a woman are when they are in pain." The images in the shed were the continuous tortures he inflicted on Donna, and what remained in the end was the eyes, the thing he desired the most. The day Benny called me to inform me of my father's passing was the day he discovered my father in the shed, slumped aside the painting of Donna's eyes. My father died in a slumped position, with both hands holding his own eyes. I burned all of my father's paintings along with his painting tools. I took Sophie back to San Jose and put my father's house up for sale. I didn't want to keep anything related to my father or his terrifying works. Only true art deserves to exist. I'm Lauren. Decided to be a single mom to raise my son, Baron. This horrific thing happened to my mom and my son 3 years ago, back when Baron was 6. It was early December and Christmas, the biggest holiday of the year, was coming up. The streets were lit up with sparkling lights all over the fake Christmas trees along the sidewalks, making it feel all cozy, even in the cold. The busy tunes from the cafes and shops mixed with all the laughter from the shoppers. I took Baron out to grab some stuff and soak up the vibe. Inside the store, there were huge pine trees covered in lights and booths full of colorful gifts, making it feel like you were in some kind of holiday wonderland. My son and I headed out once the cart was full, and he was super hyped about the stuff we just got. At the entrance, we saw a Santa Claus guy, waving and looking all chill and friendly. Baron ran over all excited. Santa's gotta be every kid's favorite when Christmas rolls around. The kid gave Santa a friendly hello and grabbed his hand. I was pretty sure this was just a store employee. They really know how to grab people's attention and make them happy. I pushed the cart forward, gave a little smile and nod like I was saying hi. Santa smiled and asked Baron what he wanted for Christmas. "An RC jet. I love it. It's so cool." Baron was totally pumped. I laughed a little. since that was actually the gift I was going to get him. You'll totally get the gift you want, for you're a good kid, right? Santa's compliments, along with the little reminder, made Baron nod. The way the guy acting like Santa talked was hilarious. He also asked how things were going for me as a single mom. At first, I was touched by the sympathy, but then it was clear I hadn't told him anything about myself, but he knew all about it. I smiled kind of shy and gave him a suspicious look. Hey, you ever heard that song about Santa kissing the mom on Christmas Eve, kid? He asked Baron, but his eyes, smile, and the whole vibe of the question were aimed at me. Before Baron could even react, and I was totally surprised, that Santa came up and kissed my hand all close-like. He didn't stop there, though. He tried to get even closer. I quickly stepped back and pulled my son away, feeling pretty frustrated. When I got to the parking lot, I looked back at the entrance, and that Santa was gone. Some people have such a weird attitude when it comes to customer service. Or is it just how people see things? I quickly shook off the thoughts about that Santa and started getting dinner ready for us. After dinner, we just kicked back in the living room, watching the Christmas special until it got pretty late. Out of nowhere, someone knocked on the door. I looked over, and then it knocked again. I told my son to stay put and walked over to the door. Honestly, I wasn't expecting anyone to show up at 10 at night. I didn't open the door, just stood a few steps back and asked, "Who's there?" I heard that familiar laugh, like in Christmas movies, and then he said, "It's Santa." Right away, Baron yelled and ran over, but I signaled him to chill and stay put. I asked him what he was doing here so late. This wasn't even the day for giving gifts to kids. Honestly, I was just trying to keep things cool for Baron, but I was pretty sure there was a scammer behind the door. The guy claiming to be Santa said he found something I dropped at Kroger this morning. So, it was that store employee my mom and I ran into earlier. I asked him what the item was, but he just gave me some vague, smart aleck answer. I don't know, but just open the door and I'll show you." "Thanks, but I didn't drop anything, and if I did, I wouldn't need it back." The guy clearly had no clue what I was talking about. He just kept going on about me opening the door and all the knocking. I made it clear again and told him I'd call the police if he stuck around for another 5 minutes. Eventually, he just left. I took Baron to the bedroom, and he wouldn't stop asking about Santa. I had no idea how to explain it to him. He'd totally freak out if I told him Santa wasn't real. The next morning, I called up Kroger's customer service to complain about their employees bugging me. But the info they gave me was wild. They said they don't have any employees dressed up as Santa at the entrance. I froze up, anxiety hitting me all at once. If he wasn't a store employee, then who the heck was he? My mind was all over the place with questions, and I couldn't focus the rest of the morning. I called the police right away and told them everything I could remember. They said they'd look into it and boost patrols around the area to keep things safe. I couldn't sleep that night. Every little sound freaked me out. I kept checking my windows and doors, feeling like something was watching me. A week later, the police called and said they caught some sketchy guy. He'd been reported for the same kind of harassment before, and turns out he had a record for burglary and trespassing too. After being grilled, he finally admitted to it. I was glad to hear he got arrested, but those cold eyes stuck with me for a long time. Baron was way too young to get what happened, but I figured I should teach him to be careful around strangers, even if they seemed friendly. That Christmas, we still put up the tree, swapped gifts, and made great memories with our son and family. But deep down, I kept reminding myself to stay on guard. The world's got its fair share of Christmas magic, but also some unexpected dangers.
Mm-hmm.